Good morning and welcome to Wake Up to Broker Up with Mark, episode number 34 for 2025. Today we're going to talk about customers, specifically buyers who are unrepresented buying a listing that you have listed. A customer by definition is an entity or a person that buys goods and or services from someone. Seems simple enough. In this case, the buyer, unrepresented, became a customer buying a listing that Atlanta Communities had listed for a seller. Probably one of the best purchase and sale agreements I've seen in a long time. Every T was crossed, every I was dotted, everything indicated that the buyer was strictly a customer, including a customer acknowledgement form, including a special stip in the purchase and sale agreement saying the buyer was unrepresented. Everything moves along. The buyer ends up closing on the property. And then 2 weeks after the buyer closes, the buyer raises their hand and says, I didn't get what I paid for. There's problems here at this property. Contractually, the buyer probably has no leg to stand on. Again, it was a very well-written purchase and sale agreement. And by virtue of the buyer closing, the buyer kind of acknowledged that everything was okay until 2 weeks after closing. Don't know what the catalyst was. Don't know why all of a sudden 2 weeks later, the buyer raises their hand and says, oh my gosh, I didn't get what I bought. And you're the problem. Meaning Atlanta Communities and the listing agent is the problem. Not the seller. They picked on the real estate company. Why? Because in their perception, the real estate company is the one that screwed them over, didn't get them what they want. And why? Because we wanted all the money, all the compensation. And the buyer, whether they did or didn't, it doesn't really matter because that's their perception, thought that they got screwed over because they ended up buying without being represented. True? Maybe. Probably. No, not at all. That's not the case. The buyer had an ample opportunity to have hired their own representation and for whatever reason chose not to. Oftentimes that's because the buyer thinks, hey, I'm going to get a better deal if I just buy without representation. A customer comes to the property. It's okay. They're going to buy as a customer. It's acknowledged that they're a customer. It's acknowledged that they're unrepresented. The buyer had every ample opportunity to make sure the property was exactly what they wanted prior to closing. And then boom, they close, and 2 weeks later, they have these problems, they find these problems, and now they want somebody to take care of it. Post-closing issues are the worst. They really are. And you know why that's the case? Because after the fact is just that, after the fact. Hard to go and undo something that was already done, or in this case, allegedly not done to the buyer's satisfaction. When you have unrepresented buyers buying a listing you have, you got to make sure that all T's are crossed, all I's are dotted, and that the buyer understands the process. Maybe you got to give them a little bit of extra oomph to make sure that they get it. But you got to make sure that the property that you're representing on the seller side is ready to go when the buyer closes on it. And you need to probably even give it a little extra care, because the last thing you want is a post-closing issue from an unrepresented buyer who was simply a customer buying a listing that you represented a seller on. Be careful. If you have a customer and you don't know how to handle a customer because you're usually dealing with represented buyers buying your listings, reach out. Call your broker. Call me. Get some advice. Minimize post-closing issues. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.